The cold wind cuts across the open fields of Normandy, June 1944. The sky is low, heavy with smoke and dust. Somewhere in the distance, a deep metallic roar breaks the silence, slow, powerful, almost unstoppable. It's not thunder, it's not artillery, it's something worse. A German Tiger tank is moving forward.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
And in front of it, barely visible through the haze, sits a group of American Sherman tanks. Lighter, thinner, and to the German crews, almost laughable. You can almost feel the tension in the air, the kind that makes your chest tighten, because everyone here knows what happens next, or at least they think they do. At this point in the war, German tank crews had a reputation, and not just for skill. They believed they were untouchable. Their Tiger I tanks were monsters, thick armor, deadly 88mm guns, and a presence that could break morale before a shot was even fired. Many German crews openly mocked the American Shermans. They called them Tommy Cookers, a cruel nickname based on how easily they caught fire when hit. To them, American tankers were outmatched, under-armored, and inexperienced. It was supposed to be easy, but war has a way of changing expectations. And what began as arrogance would slowly turn into something else, confusion, then fear, and eventually disbelief, as those same tigers began to burn. To understand how this shift happened, you have to step into the boots of the men inside those tanks. American tank crews in 1944 were not blind to their disadvantages. They knew the Sherman wasn't built to go head-to-head with a Tiger. The Sherman had thinner armor and a weaker gun. But it had something else: numbers, speed, reliability, and crews who adapted fast under pressure. Men like Staff Sergeant Lafayette G. Poole, one of the most successful American tank commanders of the war, understood that survival didn't come from brute strength alone. It came from thinking faster than the enemy. Inside a Sherman, space was tight and the noise never stopped. The engine roared just inches behind the crew. The smell of fuel, oil, and hot metal filled the air. Every man had a role, the commander watching, the gunner aiming, the loader working fast, the driver moving through danger, and the assistant driver scanning for threats. They trusted each other completely, because one mistake, 1 second too slow, could end everything. In the early days after D-Day, American armored units pushed inland through Normandy's tight hedgerow country. This terrain was a nightmare for tank warfare. Thick hedges, sunken roads, and limited visibility turned every corner into a possible ambush. German crews used this to their advantage. Tigers and Panzer IVs would hide behind cover, waiting for Shermans to come into range. When they fired, it was often over before it even began. On June 13, 1944, near the town of Villers-Bocage, a German Tiger commanded by SS Hauptsturmführer Michael Wittmann demonstrated just how dangerous these machines could be. In a matter of minutes, Wittmann destroyed multiple British tanks and vehicles, causing chaos and retreat. Stories like this spread quickly among Allied troops. The Tiger became more than just a tank. It became a symbol of fear. American crews heard these stories too, and yet they kept moving forward. Because what the Germans didn't fully understand was that American strategy was different. The U.S. Army didn't rely on one tank being superior. It relied on coordination, support, and flexibility. Shermans didn't fight alone. They moved with infantry, artillery, and air support. And slowly, this approach began to change the battlefield. Take July 1944 during Operation Cobra. The Americans launched a massive offensive to break out of Normandy. Hundreds of bombers softened German positions, and then armored units pushed through the weakened lines. This was not the kind of fight where a single Tiger could dominate. The battlefield was too large, too chaotic. Shermans moved quickly, exploiting gaps, flanking strongpoints, and overwhelming isolated German units. And something else started happening. American crews learned fast. They learned not to face tigers head-on. They learned to use terrain, smoke, and speed. If a tiger appeared, the goal was not to duel it. The goal was to outmaneuver it. Shermans would work in groups, some drawing fire while others moved to the sides or rear. The tiger's armor was strongest at the front, but weaker on the sides and back. And once a Sherman got into position, even its smaller gun could do serious damage. You can almost picture it. The engine roaring, the tracks grinding over dirt and broken hedges, the crew inside tense but focused. The commander scanning through binoculars, the gunner ready, the driver waiting for the order. Everything depends on timing, on coordination, on not making a single mistake. And then it happens. The shot is fired, not from the front, but from the side. The shell hits, sparks fly. Smoke begins to rise from the tiger. For a moment, there's silence, and then flames. This was something German crews were not used to seeing. The idea that a Sherman could take down a tiger was not impossible, but it was not supposed to be common. Yet, as the weeks went on, it happened more and more. Not because the Sherman suddenly became stronger, but because the way it was used became smarter. One often overlooked advantage was reliability. German tigers were powerful, but they were also complex and prone to mechanical failure. Their engines required careful maintenance. Their heavy weight made them difficult to move across soft ground and bridges. Shermans, on the other hand, could keep moving. They broke down less often. They could be repaired faster. This meant more Shermans were present in battle at any given time. While some tigers never even reached the front line, there were also the constant Allied air attacks. By mid-1944, the skies above Western Europe were largely controlled by Allied aircraft. German tank crews knew that if they moved during daylight, they risked being spotted and attacked. Fighter bombers like the P-47 Thunderbolt could strike quickly, forcing tanks to hide or risk destruction. This limited how and when tigers could operate. Meanwhile, American tankers adapted their tactics even further. They used smoke rounds to blind enemy gunners. They coordinated with infantry to spot hidden threats. They communicated constantly over radio, something German crews struggled with later in the war due to shortages and disruptions. One of the key turning points was the introduction of the 76mm gun on later Sherman models. While still not equal to the Tiger's firepower, it improved penetration and gave crews more confidence. Combined with high-velocity armor-piercing rounds, it allowed Shermans to engage at better ranges under the right conditions. There were also specialized units like tank destroyers, vehicles like the M10 and M18 Hellcat. These were designed specifically to hunt tanks, fast, lightly armored, but equipped with powerful guns. The Hellcat, in particular, could reach speeds of up to 55 miles per hour. It could strike quickly and reposition before the enemy could respond. German crews began to notice something was changing. The enemy they once mocked was no longer predictable. Shermans were no longer just targets. They were coordinated, aggressive, and everywhere. By late 1944, during the battles along the German border, including the Hürtgen Forest and later the Ardennes offensive, the situation became even more intense. The Germans launched a massive counterattack in December, known as the Battle of the Bulge. Once again, Tiger tanks led the charge, including the feared King Tiger, even more heavily armored and armed than its predecessor. At first, it seemed like history would repeat itself. German armor pushed forward, catching Allied forces off guard. Snow covered the ground. Visibility was low. Communication was difficult. It was the kind of environment where heavy tanks could dominate. But this time, the American response was different. Units regrouped quickly. Air support returned when the weather cleared. And tank crews, now more experienced, applied everything they had learned over months of combat. They used terrain, ambush tactics, and coordination to slow and then stop the German advance. In towns like Bastogne, American forces held their ground under intense pressure. Sherman crews fought not just tanks, but infantry, artillery, and harsh winter conditions. Every engagement was a test of skill and endurance. You can almost feel the cold inside the tank, the metal freezing to the touch, the crew wearing heavy gear but still shivering, breath visible in the air, and outside the sound of engines approaching through the snow. And again, Tigers burned. Not always easily, not without loss, but enough to make a difference. There are accounts from German veterans who later admitted that they underestimated American tank crews. They expected hesitation, confusion, weakness. Instead, they encountered determination and adaptability. They faced crews who didn't give up after the first shot, who kept moving, kept thinking, and kept fighting. One such example comes from the experiences of Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, who commanded the 37th Tank Battalion. Abrams was known for aggressive tactics and a deep understanding of armored warfare. His unit played a key role in breaking through German lines and relieving surrounded forces. He didn't rely on the tank alone. He relied on teamwork, speed, and constant pressure. Another powerful example comes from Sergeant Curtis Cullen, who helped develop a simple but effective device, the hedgerow cutter. Welded onto the front of Sherman tanks, it allowed them to break through thick hedges instead of climbing over them and exposing their vulnerable underside. This small innovation changed how tanks moved in Normandy and reduced the risk of ambush. This shift, from being underestimated to becoming a serious threat, didn't happen overnight. It was built on countless small decisions made under fire. It was built on lessons learned in real time, often at great cost. You can almost feel the change in atmosphere as the war progressed. The early confidence of German crews, the quiet certainty that they had the superior machine, began to fade. In its place came caution, then concern. Because now, every time a Sherman appeared, it wasn't just a target, it was a question. How many are there? Where are they moving? Who's supporting them? And most importantly, who is watching from the flank? By early 1945, the war had shifted heavily against Germany. Fuel shortages became critical. Many Tiger tanks were abandoned simply because they couldn't be supplied. Others were destroyed by their own crews to prevent capture. The once feared machines were now struggling to stay in the fight. American forces continued to push forward, crossing rivers like the Rhine and moving deeper into German territory. Sherman tanks rolled through towns, forests, and open fields, often facing resistance but rarely stopping. At this stage, experience made the biggest difference. American crews had been fighting for months, some for years. They understood their tanks completely. They knew how to react under pressure. They knew how to survive. And survival, more than anything, was what defined victory inside a tank. You can imagine the final moments of a Tiger crew in those later battles. The sound of incoming fire, not just from one direction, but from several. The realization that they are no longer the hunters, but the hunted. The smoke filling the inside of the tank, the heat rising, the engine failing, and outside, moving through the chaos, Shermans advancing, not alone, but together. What began as mockery ended in something very different: respect. And if you stand there in your mind, in that same field where it all started, you can almost hear the difference. The same heavy engine sound, the same metal tracks grinding forward. But now, It doesn't carry the same certainty. It carries hesitation, because somewhere out there, hidden behind smoke, behind trees, behind broken ground, a Sherman is waiting.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.